Boxing is a theater of conflict, where triumph and defeat are measured in blows. Yet for some fighters, the bell signaling the end of a round is only a brief reprieve from the battles they face outside the ring. Behind the gloves and glamour lie stories that are often as harrowing as they are human, where glory collides with missteps, and where resilience is tested beyond the ropes. For these fighters, their greatest struggles weren't against opponents, they were against themselves, the criminal justice system, or the courts of public opinion. Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s career is a testament to the discipline and skill required to remain undefeated in a sport as unforgiving as boxing. But even his meticulously constructed image of opulence and invincibility couldn't shield him from the consequences of his actions. In 2012, Mayweather's public persona took a significant blow when he was sentenced to 90 days in jail after pleading guilty to a domestic violence charge. The incident involved Josie Harris, the mother of his children, who accused him of a violent altercation. "I made mistakes. I've learned from them," Mayweather later reflected, though critics argued his time in jail, just 2 months thanks to good behavior, barely amounted to accountability. When Mayweather returned to the ring, however, it was as though nothing had changed. He dismantled opponents with the same precision and tactical brilliance that had defined his career, cementing his legacy as one of the sport's all-time greats. But questions lingered. Could Mayweather's astounding ability to compartmentalize his personal life from his professional pursuits be seen as strength or as a troubling indifference to the harm he caused? In the eyes of his fans, Money Mayweather's bankable prowess often overshadowed his fallibilities, a luxury not afforded to many others. Sonny Liston's life story reads like a script written by noir's grittiest hands. Long before he became heavyweight champion, Liston's path was paved with hardship. Growing up in grinding poverty, he turned to petty crime as a teenager, which eventually led to his first stint in prison. It was there that he discovered boxing, an outlet for the rage that had defined much of his young life. By the time he emerged as a professional, he was as much feared for his persona as for his power. "They can't hurt me," Liston once said of his detractors. "I've been hurt all my life." Despite his talent, Liston's career was constantly shadowed by his links to organized crime and frequent run-ins with the law. The FBI kept files on him, and promoters viewed him as a liability. Even his title-winning bout against Floyd Patterson in 1962, one of the most one-sided contests in heavyweight history, did little to rehabilitate his image. The losses to Muhammad Ali and his subsequent decline only deepened the air of tragedy that clung to him. When Liston was found dead in 1970, the cause listed as a heroin overdose, the whispers of foul play only added another layer of mystery to a life defined by contradictions. Vinny Pazienza's story, on the other hand, is one of defiance. Known as the Pasmanian Devil, Pazienza was as brash as he was relentless in the ring, with a career punctuated by comebacks that defied logic and medical science. In the early 1990s, however, Pazienza found himself in legal trouble after violating the terms of his probation. Details of the case remain vague, but the incident marked a low point in a life that had already seen its share of challenges. Not long after, Pazienza was involved in a near-fatal car accident that left him with a broken neck and a prognosis of permanent disability. For most people, such a diagnosis would have been the end of any athletic ambitions, but Pazienza refused to accept his fate. Against doctors' orders, he removed his medical brace early and began training in secret. "I wasn't ready to give up," he recalled years later. Within 13 months, he was back in the ring, delivering victories that would inspire millions and eventually become the subject of the film Bleed for This. Pazienza's grit earned him a second act in boxing, though his run-ins with the law remained a footnote in an otherwise remarkable career. Then there's Mike Tyson, a man whose life has been as tumultuous as his punches were devastating. In 1992, the former heavyweight champion was convicted of raping Desiree Washington, an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant. The trial was a media spectacle, with Tyson's defenders painting him as a victim of circumstance and his detractors pointing to a long history of troubling behavior. The court, however, was not swayed by celebrity, and Tyson was sentenced to 6 years in prison. He served 3. When Tyson emerged from incarceration, he was a changed man, or so he claimed. "Prison was the best thing that ever happened to me," he once said, though whether he meant it remains debatable. His return to the ring saw flashes of the old Tyson brilliance, but the controversies continued to pile up. From biting Evander Holyfield's ear during a title fight to a series of financial and legal troubles, Tyson became a symbol of wasted potential as much as one of boxing greatness. Today, he is seen as a complex figure, part cautionary tale, part redemption story. But the shadow of his conviction remains impossible to ignore. Riddick Bowe's downfall was less dramatic, but no less impactful. In 1998, the former heavyweight champion was convicted of kidnapping his estranged wife and children, a crime for which he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. The details of the case were as heartbreaking as they were shocking, with Bo claiming he had acted out of desperation to reunite with his family. "I wasn't thinking clearly," he admitted in an interview years later. The incident marked the end of his competitive career, as his attempts to return to boxing were marred by poor performances and declining health. Diego Corrales, known to fans as Chico, was a fighter who lived for the big moments. His battles in the ring were legendary, none more so than his 2005 bout against José Luis Castillo, widely regarded as one of the greatest fights in boxing history. Outside the ring, however, Corrales faced struggles of a different kind. In 2001, he was convicted of domestic battery and sentenced to 14 months in prison. For a time, it seemed as though his career might never recover, but Corrales returned to the sport with the same ferocity that had made him a fan favorite. Tragically, Corrales' life was cut short in 2007 when he died in a motorcycle accident at just 29 years old. His death shocked the boxing world, leaving fans to wonder what more he might have achieved had he been given the chance. For all his flaws, Corrales was remembered as a fighter who gave everything he had, both in the ring and in life. Tony Ayala Jr.'s story is perhaps the darkest of them all. Once considered a prodigy, Ayala's career was derailed before it could truly begin when he was convicted of raping a schoolteacher in 1983. The crime was as brutal as it was unforgivable, and Ayala was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Released on parole in 1999, he attempted a comeback, winning a handful of fights, but his reputation was irreparably damaged. Women's rights groups protested his bouts, and the boxing community remained divided over whether he deserved a second chance. Ayala continued to face legal troubles until his death in 2015, leaving behind a legacy tarnished by his actions. Tommy Morrison's life was a cautionary tale in every sense. Known as the Duke, Morrison's career was defined by his knockout power and a charisma that made him a natural star. But his personal life was a mess of legal troubles, substance abuse, and, most infamously, a 1996 HIV diagnosis that led to his suspension from boxing. Morrison disputed the diagnosis for years, even as his health visibly deteriorated. "I'm not a victim," he told reporters, though his circumstances told a different story. Morrison died in 2013, his career and life both cut short by a series of poor decisions and misfortunes. Jermaine Taylor's fall from grace was quieter, but no less tragic. A former middleweight champion, Taylor found himself in legal trouble in the mid-2010s, facing charges of assault and firearms violations. While his time in prison was brief, the incidents marked a turning point in his career. His mental health was called into question, and his performances in the ring became increasingly erratic. Taylor eventually retired, leaving behind a career that, while impressive, felt incomplete. Rubin "Hurricane" Carter's story stands apart from the rest. Unlike the others, Carter's time in prison was not the result of his own actions, but of a deeply flawed justice system. Convicted of a triple murder in 1966, Carter spent nearly 20 years in prison before his conviction was overturned in 1985. "They tried to bury me," he said after his release, "but they didn't know I was a seed." Carter never returned to boxing. Instead, he dedicated his life to advocating for the wrongly convicted, his story immortalized in the film The Hurricane. For Carter, justice came too late to save his career, but not too late to redefine his legacy. These boxers' lives serve as reminders that the line between hero and villain is often thinner than we'd like to admit. Their stories are messy, complex, and in many cases, deeply unsettling. But they are also a testament to the human capacity for resilience, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Boxing may be a sport, but for these men, it was also a stage upon which the full drama of life played out in all its triumphs and tragedies.